Hey friends, thank you so very much for tuning in. It's wonderful to have you back, and thanks for going out of your way to find the channel given YouTube's propensity to try to curb the view count via shadow banning and algorithm changes and everything else. I really very much appreciate your support. And thanks for clicking on this one. I think you're going to enjoy the conversation given the fact that gold and silver are popping and moving higher in a sea of debt internationally. We're going to talk about that and more in detail with the CEO of Winston Gold Corporation. Murray Nye joins me right now. Mr. Nye, thanks for jumping on the line. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks very much, Sean, for having me on today. I appreciate that as well.
Yeah, well, it's my pleasure. And, what I'm going to try to do is take the time to talk to a few more CEOs of mining companies because we're seeing the stocks of these mining companies, many of them move, including the juniors. So we'll talk about Winston Gold in a moment, but let me ask you specifically about this gold rigging scandal. Not only is JP Morgan a gold manipulator and silver manipulator, it's being called so now by the US Department of Justice. In fact, in very strong words, the DOJ is calling JP Morgan's precious metals trading desk a criminal enterprise. Now, Mr. Nye, I got to tell you, as recently as just a couple years ago, I don't think we would have ever heard such language from the DOJ. Your thoughts on this? It's big news.
No, I agree with you, Sean. I don't think you would either. But, of course, naturally, being in the space for since 2005, we put one mine into production in Montana started in 2005, and watched the price of gold when we started was around $300 an ounce. And we were very fortunate to start that enterprise at that time, and we had a very successful ride in the price to the price of $1,900 an ounce over the time period to 2011, I believe it was, and then slowly drift back to the $1,000 range, and then you see all these problems happening in the world. You see the fiat currencies, money being printed. Quantitative easing and all the stuff that's going on, and the price of gold under normal circumstances you would have thought with all this uncertainty going on would have done very well, yet it seemed to have a cap on it. And myself, and I'm not alone in this, I always thought there was some sort of manipulation going on, because how could something under these conditions traditionally would have these kind of moves with these uncertainties just didn't go anywhere. So it was very, very difficult to function with that kind of a gold environment where particularly industries like ours are partially driven by the price of the metal, of course, and that of course attracts investment. And when you're starting off like we are, of course, we need that investment to start these projects, and it made it very, very difficult, particularly over the last four years, to try and finance these things.
Well, no doubt about that, and a lot of juniors have gone under, or have really treaded water trying to weather this storm of the manipulation. And I just want to round out this part of the conversation by just sharing this information with the audience. I think it's fascinating. So Michael Nowak, who is the global head of base and precious metals trading at JP Morgan and the CEO of JPM Ventures Energy Corporation. He's one of the people who has his hands full with the DOJ, or should I say his hands behind his back now, I believe in cuffs, because of the DOJ's investigation. Well, this gentleman, if we shall call him that, Nowak, was just kicked off the LBMA board of directors. Now, isn't that fascinating to realize that Mr. Nowak, who is charged with being the head of a criminal enterprise at the trading desk, the precious metals trading desk at JP Morgan, he was sitting on the board of directors at the LBMA? Talk about the fox guarding the hen house.
Yeah, no kidding, Sean. It's remarkable, actually.
Yeah, it's remarkable because, the LBMA, look, we can talk about gold and silver in physical form, but when we talk about the manipulation of the metals, we have to talk about the paper markets, where I think JP Morgan was using the COMEX and futures to front run and to spoof trade these metals. It's just completely criminal. And, look, this is my opinion. I honestly think that if Hillary Clinton had won the election and she was sitting in the White House, we would not be seeing this news out of the U.S. Department of Justice regarding JP Morgan and this precious metals manipulation.
Oh, I completely agree with you on that, Sean. At least there's some transparency now. It's quite refreshing, actually.
It sure is. And let me ask you this then, as it pertains to being a CEO of a precious metals mining company. And the good news is, I think, as it pertains to Winston Gold, guys, is that it's located here in the United States. So you don't have to worry about, being in a second world or third world nation where, let's just say, the political atmosphere can literally change overnight. On Friday, gold finished out the day, I believe, up around $17 an ounce at $1,517 an ounce. And silver, boy, what did silver do? I'll have to look in a minute. But tell me about your thoughts on the miners. They seem to be bouncing back a bit.
Well, yeah, it's really refreshing. Up here in Canada, we have a pretty robust venture market, and a lot of times the precious metal sectors do get a lot of attention. But in the last 4 years, first of all, we had the cryptos and the blockchain technologies having the spotlight, and then followed by the marijuana stocks, shortly behind that. And because those markets were so lucrative, very, very little attention was paid to the, let's call it the miners. And as a result of the low prices and the lack of interest in the price, it was I should say extremely difficult to find any financing for these things. And so we've seen that the marijuana stocks kind of, take a back seat now. The rise in the price of gold is extremely attractive. It's brought some interest back into the sector. We recently raised 1.6 million Canadian dollars, converted into US about 1.2. That was buoyed by the fact of the rise in the metal. It certainly brought some interest and attraction to our company, at least. And as a result of that, we were able to get a financing done, and our stock price actually increased quite dramatically from the 4 to 5 cent Canadian range all the way. Recently had a high of 15, 16 cents and kind of settled back in the 10, 11 range. But, our share price has doubled. And I think that's largely due to the fact that there's some interest in the sector again, and people are looking at it, closely.
Yeah. As I look at your website here, Winston Gold Corp, high grade, low cost, near term gold production. Why don't you give us a little inside baseball on what you think are some of the best bragging rights you might be able to share with the audience based on what's going on at the company? I know there's some interest, or at least a connection, to Newmont Gold, which is the biggest producer, the biggest gold mining company in the world.
Great question. We just did a press release a few months ago about a fellow by the name of Joseph Caraba becoming an insider, and then subsequent to that became the chairman of the board. And Joe sat on the Newmont's board of directors for the past 9 years, just recently resigned after the Newmont Gold Corp merger, and thought the two cultures would take a lot of time to adjust to one another. And he was looking for other opportunities. And I met Joe on a phone call back in 2017, roughly around this time of year, and I didn't really know who he was, because the introduction was, could you get on a call with a New York Stock Exchange listed mining executive? And nobody told me his name, so he said, make sure you got your geologist with you. But the conversation was very, very good. Joe had a series of questions that he wanted answers to, and at the end of the call, he said, you gentlemen have answered my questions to my satisfaction. I really like what I'm hearing here. And I asked him at the end of the call, I said, Joe, would you like to have a site visit? And he said, I'll think about that, Murray. And the next day he emailed me and said, can I meet you Tuesday, such and such a day? And I said, sure, absolutely. So we met, we had a tour of the property, and he really liked what he saw. And one of the things about Joe was he sat on the board of Newmont's sustainability committee, meaning that they look at a lot of projects to keep the company buoyant on the number of ounces that it is mining and how they're going to replace those ounces. So they're always looking at, what properties they can acquire, and they have a set of metrics they use when they analyze these properties. And one of the things, as you mentioned, Sean, is the location is a big factor. So what he was looking when it came to us was the risk factors, like how do you de-risk a venture like this, which are, by nature very risky, of course. One of the things they look at is the jurisdiction, and we had high marks for that, being in the United States. United States and Canada being probably the two best in the world. The next thing was infrastructure, and we have a major highway paved within 2 miles of the actual mine site, so it's very easy to get to the property. There's no need to build roads into a remote section and God knows where. And the other thing that we have that's very, very fortunate for us is we have a major power line going right through the middle of the property. So if we ever want to run power, which we are looking at right now, to the actual mine site to where the mining portal is being established, that power is already there. We don't have to run power lines, for God knows how many miles and how many millions of dollars that would cost to do it. And there was, one of the things he looked at was the grade of the material that we're looking at. And our drilling and the historic drilling on the property has indicated these are very high grade veins in this area, although not very wide, but they are very high grade. So naturally, the higher the grade, the fewer tons you have to mine to create an ounce of gold. Of course, that makes the potential of the cost of production very low. And he looked at that very, very closely. The capex costs, because of the location, are very, very low by mining standards. We just have to drive a portal in about 900 feet to access 2 veins that we've identified through our drilling and historic drilling over the past few years. So that capex is not in the $50 million range to put a mine into production. We're looking at maybe 5 or 6. So all those factors really attracted Joe, and he started making investments primarily through private placements the company was doing to fund operations going forward. And as a result of his participation, and this is in the realm of public knowledge, because when he acquired 10% of the company, he had to he became an insider, and then he has to file all his purchases on CDAR, or SEDI, I should say, in Canada. And he is now the largest shareholder of the company, and has put a considerable amount of money into it. So I think that's a very, very good endorsement for a little company like ours to get a executive sitting on the Dumont board for the past 9 years. And Joe's got a really good history in the mining industry. He worked for Rio Tinto. He put the Diavik mine in the Northwest Territories into production for Rio Tinto. He sits on the board of Timken Steel, as well as formerly on Dumont. He sits on the board of Aecon Construction, which is one of the largest construction companies in Canada. He's got a very storied and very successful history. He also chaired and was the CEO of Cleveland Cliffs Resources. It's a New York Stock Exchange listed iron ore producer. And,
sure, I think they're located in northern Minnesota, at least. That's
very true. Under Joe's stewardship, and probably it had a lot to do with the iron ore prices being very attractive. That stock went from around $8-9 a share to a high of 130. So
wow,
he's got a very good history, and we're very pleased that he's so involved, and he is very involved. Like him and I frequently fly to Montana to visit the site to make sure how things are progressing, and him and I talk about twice a day at least. So he's highly involved with the company, and he's a wonderful resource to have.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, I like to hear that he's got that much skin in the game. Obviously, that's what we look for in these types of opportunities. All right, guys, I checked. Silver closed on Friday at $18 an ounce. That's up 25% in 1 year. It's good to finally see these metals bounce. And I think, as I believe you do too, a super cycle is coming in gold, probably silver too, as the world drowns in debt. As even now in this country, again, they're talking about QE to infinity. I think the Fed is talking about $400 billion in new QE. These banking bailouts never seem to end. It's a race to the bottom across the world. So I like the fact that this mine is based in Montana, and your website's very, very good. I've got to tell you, I've been on a lot of these websites. This one is very, very well laid out. And I've got a quote here from you. Our goal is to produce 50,000 ounces of gold per year and spend less than $10 million to achieve it. Now, that's a heck of a goal, and it sounds really juicy. It sounds good to me. How do we get there?
That was our goal when we set up the website, Sean. But I think the reason we have to rethink that, and it's not too much more money, is the fact that when we set that up, we thought there would be some opportunities to finance this thing and get it off the ground much faster than what we have. But we recently in July we started the portal. And the portal is a supported structure. There's timber sets put in every 4 feet, for ground support to make things. It's the opening to the mine actually, and it's put in place to make sure everything is supported properly. That we have a safe environment for the miners to work in. And after we get the portal established, which we think we're going to be finishing here in the next few days, we're going to then drive a drift roughly at a 1% grade. I can't even call it a decline because it's just 1%. 900 feet between 2 high-grade veins we've identified, and then drive cross cuts off that main haulage drift, which is the decline or the portal I'm talking about drift. And then we would be in a position to start test mining and bulk sampling these veins. So we think we've got the opportunity to, there's 3 custom mills in the area. We've been talking to all 3. We've got a very good chance of being successful in securing a mill. And then we're going to do a bulk sample test mining program, hopefully in the next 2 to 3 months here. And based on that, then we can ramp that up to some sort of production goal. So we're very excited about that we're that close, that we don't have to wait 2 years to get a permit or raise $50 million to do this. We're in a position right now where we can start. If I had the money, I could start tomorrow hauling out ore. So that's basically where we're at, which is, I think, for a junior miner that's in this environment that there's been very difficult for anybody to advance their projects. And we're right there in a situation where it's just starting off. So I think the position we are in is very enviable, and Joe saw that too. So that's why he got involved as much as he did.
Excellent. Well, guys, just full disclosure here. I'm not a shareholder in Winston Gold, but I'm thinking about it. And this isn't a solicitation to buy or sell any stock. You got to do your own due diligence when making any investment decision. But let me ask you this. When we talk about 50,000 ounces of gold per year at $1,500 an ounce, I think that works out to about $75 million a year. Can you give us an estimate on what it costs you guys to pull the stuff out of the ground? What is the per ounce cost estimate?
We can, it is an estimate. I want to be very clear on that, but we're estimating probably around the $700 an ounce range. And then of course you want to include your all-in sustaining cost, your drilling. We've got a very robust budget for drilling. So, I think all in we could be in the 800 change range, somewhere around there. We know what the milling costs are. We know what the trucking costs are to the mill. We've got we've had a lot of experience mining. We know what what it costs a miner per shift. So we've got the cost factors, I think really nailed down. The only question, and this is why you do a test mining phase, Sean, in a bulk sample program, is to figure out what kind of a grade you're going to be actually mining. So we think that we're going to have a very good. I've got a very, very experienced mining team in place that have a lot of experience with narrow veins like this. So I'm very confident in these guys. They work for us at the Drumlummen mine. They're very good miners, and they know what they're doing. So they tell me that they can keep the dilution is the term that's used when you take ore that isn't running gold, and you dilute what the ore-bearing material is. So that costs you a lot of money if it gets too far, too diluted. We have an assay lab on site, and that's basically to make sure that we check every round that we take. Every round, when I talk about, that's when you drill and blast the material. We sample that muck pile that we've just blasted. And then we go in and we sample the face to make sure the face where the gold is on the face, so that we're not drilling in the waste when we take the next round. So we're trying to put as much in place as far as grade control as possible, so that we can mine this successfully. So that's the kind of attention to detail we're doing.
Yeah. I think we're going to see $2,000 gold before long here. It definitely is the environment for miners to finally flourish after what feels like a 10-year bear market, if not longer at this point. All right, final question for you. Have you ever seen, I'm sure you have you ever seen that show on Discovery Channel called Gold Rush?
Yep.
It's not easy getting this stuff out of the ground, is it? Compare and contrast Winston Gold to that narrative, that TV show Gold Rush.
Yeah, it is very difficult. It's a very, it's an industry that requires a lot of talent. And most of the shows on Gold Rush, I believe, I don't follow it too closely, Sean, but I believe they're placer deposits that they mine. So, this is what they call a lode deposit. This is actually the source of that gold that gets found in those placer mines. So these are vein systems that are underground, and we're accessing them via a drift or a portal in the side of the mountain, and getting at it that way, as opposed to moving a bunch of material around and driving it through sluice boxes and whatnot, trying to capture some gold in the gravels. But these are gold-bearing veins. We have a tremendous amount of drilling that's happened, trying to confirm what these veins hold as far as the amount of gold is concerned. And you never know until you actually mine it, but we believe there's a very good chance of us being successful mining this.
All right. Well, I really appreciate the conversation, and I guess I would direct people to check out the website. It's winstongoldmining.com, and the ticker, I believe, up there on the Canadian exchange is WGC, and on the OTC in the States, it's WGMCF.
Really appreciate your time, and thanks for taking the time to look at us. I think we've got a very unique story, and we've got some very talented people, and I think we can be successful.
No, I think it's a very interesting story too, and I appreciate your time. Thanks for jumping on the line with me today.
Well, thanks a lot, Sean. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure. And guys, again, not a solicitation to buy or sell any securities. Do your own due diligence and talk to a licensed investment advisor before making any big decisions. But if you're interested in this one, it's winstongoldmining.com. You can start digging around, check it out. I really appreciate you guys. Thanks again for finding me on YouTube. And thanks for going directly to the website on a daily basis for real news, the antidote to corporate propaganda 24/7. You can visit us at sgtreport.com. God bless, guys. Have a great week ahead. Bye-bye.
What Google and YouTube are doing is that they are deliberately destroying their platforms in order to achieve their political agenda.